Hi, and welcome to the Now What Summit. I am Marty Hoofer, the Digital Content Manager for Keep Indiana Learning, and I'm excited to kick things off today with Jessica Miller. So, Jessica, why don't you tell us about yourself and what we're going to start with today?
Awesome. Hey, Marty. It's always good to see you. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jessica Miller. I'm a professional learning specialist with the Keep Indiana Learning team here at the CISC. And we are here today to be thinking about this big question of now what. So we had a Building Thinking Classrooms conference where we all went and we learned and we thought of lots of amazing things. And now I get the pleasure to think about what does what I learned mean for my practice here with Keep Indiana Learning. So as a specialist, I provide lots of professional development. I'm always trying to learn new things and trying to convey some of that information to our school partners and our other teachers across the state. And I'm excited today to specifically be thinking about instructional coaching and the role that instructional coaching plays in moving teacher work forward and in building teacher capacity and just improving practices overall. So let's go ahead and jump in. So again, one thing that I think happens a lot with instructional coaches, and I know happens with me all the time in my current role, is we have the privilege to attend lots of different professional development. And often we are sent into new professional development settings and situations with this idea of we're going to send our coach because our coach doesn't need a substitute. Our coach is available to go to professional development. They are ready to learn lots of things because they don't have specific students that they are coming back to. And so our schools and our leaders send our coaches to professional development and ask them to learn all of the things. And then we come back and we try to figure out, well, how do we help spread that wealth, right? It doesn't impact students or teachers if we just learn and keep that to ourselves. We have to figure out, how am I going to synthesize that content together? How am I going to share it with people? And how am I going to help increase and build my teacher capacity through some of the practices that we've just learned? And Marty, I'm sure you, like me, have been in situations where we might have a coach or someone that has been sent to something and they come back and they expect us to implement it right away, or they expect us to jump in and really kind of take off with that content. Has that happened to you before?
Yes, and I won't share details, but what I will share is it was contained in a binder. I was handed a binder of information from said conference, and then just to, out of context, be handed a binder, I didn't buy in because but now I've got a blue binder, and I really grew to not like blue binders. I'll be real honest with you.
I love that. And if you're anything like me, unfortunately, those very well-intentioned binders ended up on a shelf and I did not come back to them because I didn't have the context, like you said, which is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
And so I think that is such a perfect example of why coaches are powerful when it comes to professional learning, and the importance of making sure that our coaches have direction and support for moving those initiatives or putting that new professional development in place. I know I walked away from the Building Thinking Classrooms conference like I walk away from every conference with so many incredible ideas. And you're right, I can't just put it in a binder or in an email and send it and ask for that work to be enhancing the thinking and the work of the teachers in my space. So one thing that I like to think about then is, instead of thinking about this arrow, right, we're going from what the coach learned into the teachers or toward the teacher practice, is really thinking about what is a bridge and how can a coach serve as a bridge between the learning that happened in those experiences and the teachers that are doing the hard, important work for our kids. So how can we build that bridge for them, be really intentional, and find ways to get that information and content to them and to help them shift their instructional practices in a way that doesn't feel like something is being done to them, or that they are being required to make shifts that they might not be prepared or have had the professional learning for in order to be really successful with their kids.
Jessica, I like what you said there, that is the teacher ready to make the move is something that I think is often not thought about. So I think that's really important to think about for coaches is, how do I get my teachers ready? And they're all at different places. They're just like students, to make the moves that we know will help them be more successful.
Yes, and you are so right. And we are all in different places, and we might be along the same journey. We might have our arrows pointed in the right direction, and we are still in different places along that path. So we need to be met in a place that builds off of what we're doing well. So I really like to think about our approaches with coaching as that strengths-based approach and thinking about what is it that my teachers or my partners are currently doing, where is it we'd like to go, and what are the strengths that we can build off of to get them to that next step. And I don't know about you, Marty, but I know I am always much more willing to dive into something new if I feel prepared for it. So if someone is able to say, here's what you're doing really well, and here's where we could go, but let's partner together on it, I'm much more likely to engage in that type of a growth than I am if someone were to just say, ooh, I need you to change your practice. I need you to do something else. That doesn't feel very good.
No, because that feels scary. Like I have to then do it by myself. And then I'm going to be judged for how well I do or don't do it. But if you're willing to come along with me, that feels much less scary.
Absolutely. Yes, I love that. Thank you, Marty. And so when we think about this specifically with building thinking classrooms, there are 14 practices that Peter Liljedahl has spelled out in his book for us and have shared in ways where we can structure our classroom so that students are really doing a lot of thinking. And when we think about shifting into those 14 practices, I was trying to process through what might be some strengths or some practices that I might see in my current teachers that might be like an opening for coaching, something that might give me an entry point to start with to help shift their practice into something bigger. Now, this is really just a first step. So the goal here is to identify a strength and to then invite teachers into growing their practice with that work. There is obviously much more work that's going to happen moving forward from here if we're going to be implementing all of those 14 practices. And there are specific pieces that we can look for as just those entry points and those invitations to get teachers started. So one of the pieces that I was thinking a lot about at the conference was the idea of building thinking classrooms work really being driven by thinking tasks that get kids to be really thoughtful and dig deep in their work. And so I processed through what might it look like if a teacher were ready for this kind of practice, if they were ready to be taking on this kind of next step. And so I know that I have lots of teachers that really love flexible thinking routines. They love lots of math warm-ups. They love when kids get to turn and talk with each other and explain their thinking and approach in lots of different ways. And I also have lots of teachers that really look for high-level, complex, cognitively demanding tasks for kids. And so those two pieces right there are strengths that I have in my teachers that they are bringing to the table that I can use then to help open the door to move them into this idea of the giving thinking tasks as a part of Toolkit 1 in building thinking classrooms. Another one of those toolkit ones, those opening practices of building thinking classrooms, is using vertical non-permanent surfaces. So getting kids up around the room, getting them to show their thinking, explain their thinking, talk with each other, all of that. And again, we have lots of teachers in our spaces that really appreciate and value when students show their thinking. They use dry erase boards or other methods to help students have spaces to be working out their math instead of just doing it in their head. And then we also have teachers that are really, really good at analyzing what students are doing and figuring out what they're doing well in their next steps. So if I have a teacher like that, if I have somebody who really does value that opportunity for students to show their thinking, then I might be able to entice the teacher to move towards building thinking classrooms by inviting them into a partnership specifically around those vertical non-permanent surfaces as a first step. Again, it's all about that first step, just getting them started with a little snippet of something, knowing that we're going to have some additional work kind of down the line as we keep digging. But as coaches, we've got to always look for those openings. Now, one thing that I also want to mention is these two practices in particular are ones that I see many teachers start immediately. They're ready to go on their own as soon as they hear about these ideas of giving thinking tasks to kids and using those vertical non-permanent surfaces. And Marty, again, I'm sure in your background, there are also times for you, just like with me, where we heard about something and we were ready to go. It was like the next day, right? It was implemented. I learned about the idea of using a new technology tool. I remember this one specifically. I'm not going to name the tool, but it totally changed my world. And the next day I was figuring out how to implement it in my classroom. And that was great. I was able to do that on my own. And other times we needed a partner with us. We need somebody who's willing to engage and really support us kind of through that process. So when we are thinking specifically about that bridge and supporting teachers from a current practice into a new or an enhanced practice. Again, often we want to be strengths based. So we have teachers doing great things. It's not about changing, it's about enhancing what they're doing and strengthening their instruction. So as a coach, then what we can do is really be in that teacher's area and thinking about how we can notice and name specific strengths for teachers. I've had this conversation multiple times the last couple of weeks, Marty, and I'm not sure if you have noticed the same thing, but often I find it so fascinating that the teachers that I work with are really willing to say, here are the things that didn't work, but they don't always say the things that are going really well. Have you had that experience too, Marty?
Yes. So as soon as you said that, I flashed back to a coach I had who we started every meeting. I met with her regularly, and I had to name something that was going well. And that was always, I mean, I learned that this was going to come, so I would think in advance. But at the beginning, I was like, now let me list 14 things that aren't going well. Yes, and so Jessica, I think you're so right. Teachers are really good at beating up on themselves. So let's name what's going well and help it go better. Why would I not want to start there?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's so important. If I want to feel that I am having an impact on student learning, I need to be able to say what it is I'm doing. And so often I think even often once teachers start naming celebrations, sometimes they name them through the lens of what the kids are doing too. And they'll just say, oh, the kids just had a really great day and they were really engaged. And that might be true, but you as the teacher did a whole lot to make that happen.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Yes, and it's important to name that because you did work really hard to make that happen. So not that the credit is all for you to take, because the kids do have a role in it, but you were a critical component to that success.
Absolutely. And I think it's been such a privilege, both as an instructional coach and in my current role, to be the person who gets to say, Marty, what did you do really well? Or here's something I noticed that happened in your space that really impacted student learning in a positive way, and really bringing that front and center for teachers. And so anytime we're thinking about this idea of bridging or shifting current practices, the best thing that we can do is start by noticing and naming what teachers are already doing well or even already thinking about trying, and then coming alongside them in a way where we can prompt them to consider new practices, where we can think about what does a partnership look like if we want to be helping you to move into a new instructional practices, or what is it that we can do to continue to build off of the teacher's strengths in ways that are going to move that work forward, both for the teacher practice and for the student learning that's going to be happening as a result of those improved practices. Again, these are our openings for coaching work. So I work with many coaches, and one of the questions is always, how do I get people to work with me? And unfortunately, you can't get people to work with you, in my opinion, as an instructional coach. But you can look for openings and you can look for opportunities and you can offer your partnership to the teachers that you're partnering with. And so by thinking through ways that we can notice and name strengths with our teachers and think about their next steps in their journey, we could view that bridge as an opening to say, hey, I'm noticing this is happening. I also know you've been thinking about this new practice. Could we partner together and find a way to start implementing some of that practice? And honestly, again, Marty, my favorite thing was when I had a coach in my space, when I had somebody else to be talking and thinking about and supporting me. And I know you and I have talked about that quite a bit too. And so for coaching in particular, we've got to be careful that we're not trying to convince people to work with us. We're looking to meet them where they are and then offering our support and guidance as they move forward. And these openings come in lots of different places, not just with instructional practices and the way that those are growing, but this is one place where we can look for those specific openings into our work. And so when we have identified some strengths and we are able to be thinking about what that means next and where teachers are going, then we really become a partner in that work. So we've got 2 more practices that you're seeing on the screen right now from Peters 14. And the first one that I want to touch about is the Toolkit 3, Students Write Meaningful Notes. So this comes later in the book because it's actually a practice that comes later in the implementation if you're following Peter's order. And so I wanted to touch on this one Because again, if we're looking for an in, if we're looking for an opening, or if we're looking for an opportunity to partner with a teacher, we might see teachers that are using note-taking structures, that are using graphic organizers, that want to give resources to students. There are lots of things that we might see them doing that we know they value, that we can then use as the way to move their instructional practice forward. Again, this would serve as an entry point or a first step in building thinking classrooms, and just a very small, let's get you engaged, let's get you thinking about it. And then if this felt comfortable for the teacher, then we could go and start thinking about all of the toolkits and all of the pieces that we would want to put in place for that building thinking classrooms work to happen really effectively and to result in increased student thinking and increased student learning as well. But we can start with just a little nugget based on what teachers value and what their strengths are, and then lean into that more intense work moving forward. Another one that comes up in Toolkit 2, there are 4 toolkits, it comes up in Toolkit 2, is the idea of the teacher needing to be sure that they only answer keep thinking questions. So these are those questions that are actually students need an answer to, but we answer them in a way that keeps the kids thinking, versus just I'm nearby and a student asks me a question that they can figure out the answer to on their own, or they're just engaging with me because I happen to be there. And so when I am thinking about teachers that might be ready for that step, I'm thinking about those teachers who are constantly telling me that they want their kids to be more independent and they want their kids to be able to solve their own problems. And unfortunately, and I know, again, I was the same way at the beginning of my career, sometimes we as teachers create a space where our students do feel that they can ask us anything, and they do kind of depend on us because of the way that we answer every question that they ask, or because of the way that we don't necessarily build independence with our students. So when I see teachers that want kids to be independent, they want to use really solid questioning with their students to put the thinking back on them and to be sure that they're the ones solving their own problems and figuring out their own answers to their questions. This is where I might be able to say, oh, we've been talking a lot about how you'd like to increase independence with your students during your math block. What if we tried this strategy and we learned more about this idea of keep thinking questions and how we can use those with your students so that they maintain their independence during their work time? Just a touch, just a little bit of work that we can do with them. Again, the goal being then that we're able to move that instructional practice forward through the partnership and through the opening that we found, knowing that there might be other practices that then we're going to need to circle back to and we're going to need to focus on in order to build the entire thinking classroom structure, if that's what we're looking to do in our spaces. So Marty, I'm sure, again, I keep saying, I feel like we have, very similar experiences in our background. I'm sure you can think of a time, where a coach was really good at offering you kind of just a next step nudge, or notice something that you were thinking about and thought, hey, this would be a really good next step. Let's partner. I bet you've had experiences like that. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. I can think of a situation where a coach presented an idea to me, and I'll be honest with you, I knew she was probably right, but it was kind of it was a bigger step than I was willing to take at the time because it felt scary. And so what I appreciated about her, and I've told her this since, is that she didn't give up on me. She just kept gently, we worked on other things, but she just kept circling back to this one idea that she was pretty sure if I would make this one move, I would see great gains. But I just felt like it was a really big step for me. Now looking back, I think, Marty, come on, it wasn't that big. But in the moment it was. And so I appreciated the fact that she knew I wasn't quite ready, but she didn't let it go. She just kept bringing me back to it. And I think that was really powerful. But also, Jessica, something you were saying about the toolkits, and about even if you're not ready, or a teacher isn't ready, isn't thinking about going full on all 14 things, you know what? There are really powerful pieces of this to get our students thinking more, learning more, engaged more. So even if somebody's not ready for the whole thing, man, there are some, like you called them nuggets earlier, that really we could see, students would see quite a difference in just trying a few little nuggets.
Absolutely. It reminds me of some support that I was doing when I was in an instructional coaching role with shifting some of our practice. And it was really changing our entire instructional block from one model to a different kind of model. And again, I had teachers that were ready to go, and they did it, right? They shifted their work, they rearranged everything, they did exactly what they needed in order to make that happen. And then I had lots of teachers who just weren't quite ready for that yet. And so we were able to think about what is one piece that you are ready to try or does sound interesting to you, and let's get that one piece really good, and then we'll think about building the others as well. But every move that we make can improve instruction and can improve student outcomes as long as we're willing to make a step. Even if we might not feel ready for the whole thing, we can take on a little part of it just to get started. Absolutely. So again, as we're kind of winding down our time for this session, I would just love for us to continue to think about how we can use coaches as bridges from what's happening in the professional development and in the coaching world and the PD that they get to attend back to the teachers in a way that feels like a true partnership, and a way where we are able to build off of what teachers are already bringing to the table and bringing into their classrooms, and then think about how we can move that instruction and those practices forward, rather than the idea of fixing teachers or just needing to kind of push new experiences onto them. Our teachers bring so many strengths and so many wonderful experiences into the classroom and into any school that they enter. And we really want to find ways that we can build off of that as we are working towards new initiatives or new programs or new models in our classrooms. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. It was really fun, Marty. Thank you for being here. I love getting to reflect and just think about, how is what we've been learning in our own professional learning, how does that impact my work? And specifically thinking about the coaching world, there's so many great things happening with instructional coaches around this state. And I'm always grateful to have a chance to stop and reflect with amazing people like you, Marty. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. And this is just part one of our 9-part, I believe it is now, What Summit. So they continue through 5:30 this afternoon. So whether you can join live or catch them later on our YouTube channel, we're glad to have you as a part. And Jessica, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.